What should I do if my parents are getting divorced and neither want me? 16F. My name is Alex and I'm 16 years old. Up until a few months ago, my life was pretty normal. I had a close relationship with both my parents and my younger brother Sam. We were a tight-knit family and did lots of things together. Sure, my parents would argue sometimes, but what couple doesn't? I never imagined things would turn out the way they did. It started with little things, like my dad coming home later from work, and my mom seeming more irritable. The arguments between them grew more frequent and intense. There was a constant tension in the air at home. I tried to stay positive, focusing on school and spending time with Sam. I kept hoping things would get better between Mom and Dad. Then one evening, they sat me and Sam down in the living room. They said they had something important to tell us. My stomach twisted into knots as I saw the somber looks on their faces. "Your mother and I have decided to get a divorce," my dad said, his voice devoid of emotion. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. Divorce? This couldn't be happening, not to our family. I looked over at Sam, who had started crying. I put my arm around him, trying to comfort him even as my own mind reeled. Over the next few weeks, my parents separated and began the divorce proceedings. I was sad and angry, but a part of me still hoped that things would work out in the end. Maybe they just needed some time apart, and they'd eventually realize they still loved each other. Then we could be a family again. But as I would soon find out, my parents had other plans for their futures. Plans that didn't seem to include me. I had no idea that the worst was yet to come and that my whole world was about to be shattered. All the stability and love I had taken for granted was about to be ripped away, leaving me lost and more alone than I had ever felt in my life. I couldn't have imagined how much pain and fear the coming weeks and months would bring. I was in my room working on homework one evening when I heard raised voices coming from downstairs. It sounded like my parents were arguing again. I sighed and tried to tune it out. But then I heard my name mentioned. Curious, I quietly crept out of my room and snuck halfway down the stairs to listen. "I don't have time to take care of a teenager right now," my mom was saying. "I'm too busy with work and I want to focus on my career now that I'm single again." "Well, I'm not taking Alex either," my dad retorted. "I'm starting a new life with Lisa and I don't need a kid around cramping my style. Teenagers are too much work." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own parents saying they didn't want me, that I was just an inconvenience to them? I felt sick to my stomach. I stumbled back up to my room in a daze, their words echoing in my head. The next day, I confronted them about what I had overheard. "So what, you're just going to abandon me?" I asked, my voice shaking with anger and hurt. "You don't want to be my parents anymore?" They both looked uncomfortable but didn't deny it. "Alex, try to understand," my mom said. "This divorce has been hard on all of us. Your dad and I just need some time to focus on ourselves right now." "Please don't take it personally," my dad added. "It's not that we don't love you, it's just complicated." I stormed out of the room, hot tears stinging my eyes. I had never felt so betrayed and unwanted in my life. These were the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, who had promised to always be there for me. But now they were casting me aside like I meant nothing to them. Over the next few days, I struggled to wrap my mind around my new reality. My parents didn't want me. I couldn't stay with either of them. Where was I supposed to go? What was I supposed to do? I had never felt so helpless and alone. I barely ate or slept. I went through the motions of going to school, but I couldn't focus on anything. I was consumed by fear and despair. I didn't know how to deal with the overwhelming pain and rejection I was feeling. I wanted so badly for this to all just be a bad dream I could wake up from. But deep down, I knew it was real. This was my life now, and I had no idea what was going to happen to me. I felt like I was drowning and I didn't know how to save myself. Desperate to find a solution, I started reaching out to everyone I could think of for help. I called my aunt and uncle, but they lived across the country and said they couldn't take me in. I asked my grandparents, but they were dealing with health issues and couldn't handle caring for a teenager. I even reached out to my best friend's family, despite knowing they were going through a tough time financially. "I'm so sorry, Alex," my friend said, her voice full of sympathy. "I wish we could help. But my parents are barely making ends meet as it is. We just don't have the resources to take on another person right now." I understood, but it was still a blow. It seemed like every door I tried was slamming shut in my face. In a last-ditch effort, I started researching foster care. But the more I read, the more scared I became. Stories of kids being bounced from home to home, of abuse and neglect, filled me with dread. I couldn't imagine myself in that situation. As the days went by, I sank deeper into despair. I barely had the energy to get out of bed in the morning. I felt like a burden to everyone around me. My parents didn't want me, and it seemed like no one else did either. I started to wonder if there was something wrong with me, if I was just inherently unlovable. I withdrew from my friends and stopped participating in class. My grades started slipping, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Nothing seemed to matter anymore. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of hopelessness, and I didn't know how to keep my head above water. At night, I lay awake for hours, my mind spinning with worst-case scenarios. What if I ended up on the streets? What if I got stuck with an abusive foster family? What if I never found a place to belong? The fear and uncertainty were consuming me, and I didn't know how to cope. I had never felt so utterly lost and alone in my life. I was only 16, but it felt like my whole world had crumbled around me. I didn't know how to pick up the pieces or where to go from here. All I knew was that I couldn't keep going like this. Something had to change, but I had no idea what that something might be. I felt like I was grasping at straws, desperate for any glimmer of hope to hold on to. But hope seemed like a distant memory, a luxury I could no longer afford. I was barely hanging on, and I didn't know how much longer I could keep up the fight. Just when I thought all hope was lost, a small ray of light appeared in the form of my school counselor, Mrs. Thompson. She had noticed my sudden change in behavior and grades and called me into her office one day after class. At first, I was reluctant to open up to her. I didn't want to burden anyone else with my problems, and I was afraid of being judged or pitied. But Mrs. Thompson had a way of making me feel safe and understood. She listened to me without interrupting, her eyes full of compassion and concern. As I poured out my heart to her, telling her about my parents' divorce and their rejection of me, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. It was the first time I had truly been able to express all the pain and fear I was carrying inside. Mrs. Thompson validated my feelings and assured me that none of this was my fault. She also helped me see that I had options, even if they weren't ideal. She told me about a local youth shelter that provided temporary housing and support services for kids in situations like mine. She also said she would reach out to some foster families she knew who were known for being caring and supportive. I was hesitant at first, scared of the unknown and of being let down again. But Mrs. Thompson's confidence and encouragement gave me a small spark of hope. Maybe I didn't have to face this alone. Maybe there were people out there who could help me, even if my own parents couldn't. Over the next few weeks, I continued to meet with Mrs. Thompson regularly. She helped me work through my emotions and start to build a plan for my future. She also connected me with a therapist who could provide more in-depth support. Slowly but surely, I started to feel a little bit stronger, a little bit more in control. I knew I still had a long road ahead of me, but for the first time since my parents' divorce, I felt like I had a path forward. I had people in my corner who cared about me and wanted to help me succeed. It wasn't easy, and there were still plenty of moments of doubt and fear. But every time I felt myself starting to slip back into despair, I thought of Mrs. Thompson's unwavering belief in me. I thought of the possibility of a better future, one where I was surrounded by people who loved and supported me unconditionally. I knew I had to keep fighting, keep pushing forward, no matter how hard it got. I owed it to myself to build a life that was full of love and purpose, even if my parents couldn't be a part of it. And for the first time in a long time, I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could do it.